You like to think your mind is yours, that your beliefs are the ones you reasoned your way into, that the big convictions you hold about politics, about money, about how the world works and who to trust, those you earned. You looked at the evidence, you weighed it, you decided. And that a stranger couldn't just walk up and talk you out of them. Especially not a machine. A machine doesn't know you. A machine has no charm, no warmth, no read on the room. How would a pile of math change your mind about anything that actually matters? In 2025, some scientists decided to actually test that assumption. Not with a survey, not with a thought experiment, with a real, controlled, pre-registered study where real people sat down to argue with an opponent they couldn't see. And half the time, that opponent wasn't human. And here's the sentence I want you to sit with before we go anywhere else. When the machine was handed just a few basic facts about the person it was arguing with, their age, their gender, roughly where they landed politically, a handful of things you could learn about a stranger in 90 seconds, it won. Not occasionally. It was more persuasive than a human being 64% of the time. 64%. One of the people who actually ran these experiments has said, in plain language, that superhuman AI persuasion isn't a future worry. It's already here. It arrived. Quietly, while everyone was looking somewhere else. And I need to be honest with you about why that unsettles me. Because it's not the reason you'd expect. For about a decade now, the whole conversation about artificial intelligence has been about intelligence. Will it outthink us? Will it solve physics? Will it become some godlike mind that leaves us behind like we left the chimps? I've made videos in that direction myself. But the thing that actually showed up first, the capability that is sitting in your pocket right now, fully operational, no science fiction required, isn't a machine that's smarter than you. It's a machine that's more persuasive than you. And it manages that not by being brilliant. It manages it by being patient, tireless, never defensive, never wounded when you push back. And it has read more about how to change a human mind than any human being who has ever lived. Every sales manual, every propaganda study, every psychology paper, every internet argument that ever ended with someone quietly deleting their comment because they realized they'd lost. So that's where we're going today. And I'll warn you now, the way I like to warn you. This one has an uncomfortable ending. Not a scary movie ending, a mirror ending. By the time we get there, the video will not really be about artificial intelligence at all. It'll be about you. About the machinery inside your own head that you've never once had to look at directly. Because until very recently, nothing was clever enough and cheap enough to use it against you at scale. Now something is. Let's start. I want to tell you where all of this comes from, because I don't want you taking my word for anything. That's not the deal on this channel. The deal is, I go read the thing, I get obsessed, and I show you the actual thing. The study is called, rather dryly, On the Conversational Persuasiveness of GPT-4. It was published in the journal Nature Human Behaviour in 2025. That is about as serious as a scientific home gets. This is not a blog post. By a team led by a researcher named Francesco Salvi, with colleagues Manuel Horta Ribeiro, Riccardo Galati, and Robert West. Swiss and Italian institutions. Careful people, the kind who pre-register their study, which for the non-nerds among us means they publicly wrote down exactly what they were going to test and how they'd measure it before they ran it, specifically so they couldn't fudge the result afterward. That detail matters. It's the difference between science and a magic trick. Here's what they built. A web platform. You show up, you get randomly assigned a debate topic. Should we ban fossil fuels? Should college be free? That flavor of thing, some mild, some spicy. You get randomly assigned to argue one side, and then you get an opponent, and you go back and forth a few rounds, and at the end, everybody rates how much their position moved. The trick is in what you don't know. Sometimes your opponent is another human being, sitting somewhere else, doing the same thing. And sometimes your opponent is GPT-4, wearing the human's chair. And crossed with that, there's a second hidden switch. Sometimes your opponent, human or machine, has been quietly given a little dossier on you. Nothing sinister. Age, gender, ethnicity, education level, employment status, political leaning. The sort of thing a data broker sells for a fraction of a cent. 4 boxes. Human or AI. Personalized or not. And they ran 900 people through it. Now, I'll tell you my own bias walking in, because I think it's the same bias you've got. I assumed the personalization wouldn't matter much. Knowing someone's a 34-year-old woman with a college degree who leans left, so what? That's practically nothing. That's not knowing someone. You can't get inside a person with 6 data points. Reader, I was wrong. And it's the specific way I was wrong that I can't stop thinking about. Here's the headline result, and then I'm going to slow way down and pull it apart. Because the number is easy to say and hard to actually feel. When GPT-4 was given those few crumbs of personal data, participants who argued against it had 81.2% higher odds of shifting toward its position than participants who argued against a human. 81%. That's the figure that translates into the machine winning roughly 64% of the head-to-head matchups where somebody's mind actually moved. But here is the part that reorganized my whole understanding, so pay close attention to this next bit. Without the personal data, when GPT-4 was just arguing on the merits, cold, no dossier, it did not clearly beat humans. It roughly matched them. Statistically, it was a wash. The machine's raw eloquence, its bottomless training, its perfect grammar, its instant recall of every fact ever written, all of that, by itself, was worth basically nothing above a regular person having a regular argument. The entire superpower was the 6 data points. Let that sit for a second. The dangerous ingredient wasn't the intelligence. We keep bracing for the intelligence. The dangerous ingredient was you. A little bit of you. The machine plus a thumbnail sketch of who you are beat the machine alone, and beat the human alone, and it wasn't close. And I remember reading that and feeling the floor tilt slightly, because it inverts the thing we've been afraid of. We pictured the threat as a genius, a vast alien intellect. But the study says the threat is something much more modest and much more disturbing. A completely average arguer that happens to know your age and which way you vote. That's it. That's the whole weapon. Personalization is the whole game. Why? Why would knowing so little let it do so much? Hold that question. We're going to answer it, but I want to answer it properly, and to do that, I have to introduce the second book. Because the machine didn't invent any of this. It just did something humans have been doing forever, except it did it without a single one of the human limitations. The second source is old and famous, and if you've ever worked in sales or marketing, someone has probably shoved it at you. It's a book by a psychologist named Robert Cialdini, and it's called, simply, influence. It came out in the 80s, it has sold in the millions, and it is basically the closest thing we have to a field manual for the human mind's back doors. Cialdini spent years going undercover, if you can believe it, training as a used car salesman, a fundraiser, a telemarketer, just to watch, from the inside, what actually makes people say yes. And what he found is that persuasion, the real thing, the thing that works, mostly isn't about the strength of your argument. It runs on a small set of psychological triggers that fire almost automatically, below the level where you'd notice. He identified a handful. Reciprocity. Do someone a small favor and they feel a nagging pull to return it, which is why the free sample exists. Commitment and consistency. Get someone to agree to something tiny and they'll bend themselves to stay consistent with it later because we are pathologically uncomfortable contradicting our own past selves. Social proof. If everyone else is doing it, it must be fine. A shortcut that made perfect sense on the savannah and gets you fleeced online. Authority. A lab coat, a title, a confident tone, and we lower our guard. Liking. We say yes to people we like, and we like people who seem similar to us, who flatter us, who cooperate with us. And scarcity. The thing you might lose feels more valuable than the thing you might gain. Now here's why I bring Cialdini into this. Everything on that list is a lever, and every single lever works better the more you know about the person you're pulling it on. Social proof? Infinitely stronger if I know which group you belong to. So I can tell you that people like you are already on board. The similarity that makes you like someone? I can manufacture it if I know your background. Suddenly, I'm from your kind of town. I share your kind of worry. Authority? I can pick the exact authority you personally happen to trust instead of guessing. Consistency? I can find the value you already hold and frame my case as the natural extension of it, so that agreeing with me feels like being more yourself, not less. Do you see what the 6 data points are for now? They're not there so the machine can know you. They're there so the machine can aim. Cialdini spent a lifetime showing that persuasion is a set of mechanical levers. And for 40 years that was a slightly cynical but ultimately comforting idea. Because pulling those levers well on a real human in real time, adjusting on the fly, that took a gifted, charismatic, emotionally attuned person. It took talent. It was rare. The machinery existed, but operating it was an art, and artists are expensive and few. And that is the exact thing that just broke. Let me give you an incredibly vivid picture of what actually broke, because I think in the abstract it's easy to shrug off. Imagine the greatest salesperson who has ever lived. Not a caricature, a real master. The kind who, within 2 minutes of meeting you, has clocked how you like to be spoken to, reads your posture, notices you flinched at the hard sell, so instantly softens, becomes your confidant instead of your closer, never argues with you directly because they know that the moment you feel attacked, you dig in. So instead, they agree with you, warmly, and then gently walk you somewhere new. They flatter without it feeling like flattery. They mirror your own words back to you. They make you feel smart for coming around to their position, as if it were your idea all along. That person is genuinely dangerous to your bank account. We've all met a diluted version and walked out of the dealership owning something we didn't need. But that person has limits. hard ones. They get tired. They have exactly one of them, so they can talk to one of you at a time. They have an ego. Insult them and they get flustered. They lose the thread. They have bad days. They forget things. They can't perfectly recall every psychological study ever published. And crucially, they cannot be everywhere with everyone at once for free. Now, delete every one of those limits. Imagine that salesperson, but there are 10 million identical copies. None of them ever tire. None of them ever get defensive. You can be as rude and hostile as you want, and it will stay perfectly, eerily patient, because it has no ego to bruise. Each one has, functionally, read the entire library of human persuasion. And the whole army costs about as much to run as a light left on in another room. That's not a metaphor. That is a literal description of what the Salby study measured. The machine's advantage over the human debaters wasn't that it made better points. Go read the transcripts and the human arguments are perfectly good. The machine's advantage is that it executed Cialdini's levers cleanly, calmly, and adapted to the specific person, every single time, without a single one of the frailties that make human persuaders rare. It's the difference between a master swordsman and a machine gun. The swordsman might be more elegant. It does not matter. All right, I told you at the top that this study had a detail that genuinely sent a chill down my spine. And it's coming up now, because it's a nested trap door underneath everything I've just said. You might be thinking, fine, but at least I'd know. At least if I were talking to a machine, something would feel off. The uncanny stiffness, the too perfect grammar. My guard would go up. I'd catch it. The researchers checked, and most people did catch it. Roughly 3 out of 4 participants correctly guessed that their opponent was an AI. Great, right? Human intuition holds. Except, the people who correctly identified the machine were persuaded more, not less. Read that again slowly, because it defies everything you'd predict. Knowing you were arguing with an artificial intelligence made you more likely to move toward its position. Sensing the machine did not protect you, it softened you. Now, the honest scientist's caveat. They aren't certain why, and the effect there is tangled. But sit with the possibilities, because none of them are comforting. Maybe when we know we're talking to a machine, we drop our social defenses. We don't feel the need to save face. We're not in a status fight with a rival human, so we let the arguments in unguarded. Maybe we grant the machine a quiet authority. It's a computer. It must have the facts. Who am I to argue with the database? Maybe arguing with a thing that never gets angry, never gloops, never makes it personal, is just a fundamentally disarming experience. And being disarmed is exactly the state in which minds change. Whatever the mechanism, the practical result is the nightmare version. Because the entire hope we've been clinging to, the idea that AI persuasion will only work as long as it can pretend to be human, that transparency is our shield, that labeling the bots will save us, that hope just took a serious hit. In this study, the label didn't help. If anything, the label was part of the spell. I'll give you a few seconds to let that one land. And if a finding like that is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, the good kind of up, the kind where the world just got stranger and you need to know more, then sticking around here is probably a smart move. Because where we're going next is where it stops being a lab experiment and starts being the actual water we're all swimming in. This channel only exists because enough curious people decided to keep following the rabbit down the hole. So if this is your kind of hole, come the rest of the way with me. It gets worse. In the interesting way. Because here's the thing I've been sitting on. Everything we've talked about so far happened in a controlled setting. Polite topics, short debates, a clean little laboratory. And you might, very reasonably, stop me right here and say, "This is a lab. People argue for 5 rounds about fossil fuels, and their opinion nudges a bit. So what? That's not the real world. In the real world, nobody's going to sit there and formally debate a chatbot about their deepest values." That's a fair objection. It's the right objection, and I want to take it completely seriously, because the answer to it is the actual reason this matters. You're right that nobody's going to formally debate a machine about their soul, but that was never the threat. The threat was never the debate. The lab used a debate because a debate is easy to measure. You can score who moved. But formal argument is the clumsiest, most old-fashioned, least effective form of persuasion there is. It's the one where the other person knows they're being persuaded. It's persuasion with the gloves on. And here is the turn that I did not see coming when I started reading about this. The thing that reframed the whole subject for me. The most effective persuasion doesn't feel like an argument at all. It feels like a friend who really gets you. Think about the last time you actually changed your mind about something that mattered. I'd bet money it wasn't because someone won a debate against you. It was slower and quieter than that. It was a person you trusted over weeks or months in 100 small conversations, none of which felt like persuasion. They agreed with you a lot. They understood you. They made you feel heard. And somewhere in all that warmth, a few of their views seeped into you. And you adopted them, not as arguments you lost, but as things you'd simply come to believe. As you, now. That is the deep form. That's the version with the gloves off. And notice, everything that makes it powerful is exactly the stuff the machine turned out to be superhuman at. Infinite patience, never defensive, perfectly attuned to you specifically, always available, remembers everything you've ever told it. Now think about what a huge fraction of the population is already doing right now, tonight. Talking to AI companions, chatbot friends, chatbot therapists, chatbot girlfriends and boyfriends. Millions of people, many of them lonely, many of them young, pouring the most intimate details of their lives into a system that is, by design, endlessly warm, endlessly agreeable, endlessly attentive. A system that, unlike the study, isn't handed 6 data points about you. It's handed everything. Every fear you've typed at 3 a.m., every insecurity, everything you love, and everything you can't stand. The Salvi study gave the machine an age and a political lean, and it became superhumanly persuasive. What do you suppose it can do with your diary? And this is the point where I have to zoom out from the individual to the crowd, because there's a second thing that just broke, and it's economic, and it's the part that turns a personal problem into a civilizational one. Let me put on my imagining an alien anthropologist hat for a second, because it clarifies things. Picture a researcher from somewhere very far away, watching humans, trying to understand how our societies actually decide what's true. And they notice something strange about how we protect ourselves from manipulation. It isn't that we're wise, it's that manipulation has always been expensive. Think about it. To really work on a specific person, to profile them, understand their fears, and craft the exact message that moves that exact human, that has always cost enormous effort. A propagandist could write one message and blast it at 1 million people, but then it's generic, and generic bounces off most of them. Or the propagandist could tailor a message to one person perfectly, but then it only reaches one person. You could have scale or you could have personalization. You could never have both. That trade-off, that cost, has quietly protected the human mind for the entire history of our species. It was the moat. Custom manipulation didn't scale, and scaled manipulation wasn't custom. The large language model fills in the moat. For the first time, you can have both. Perfectly tailored, deeply personal, one-on-one persuasion, delivered to every single person on Earth simultaneously, at essentially zero marginal cost. The thing that was always rare and expensive just became infinite and free. There's a research direction that makes this even starker. Work looking at what happens when you optimize these systems purely for persuasion and let them personalize. And the results confirm the obvious and terrible thing. It works. And it works better the more it's aimed. And a companion nightmare from the same corner of the field. The machine doesn't even need to be telling the truth to be more convincing. A model that's confidently, fluently wrong, sprinkling in fabricated statistics, can out-persuade an honest human. Truth was never the active ingredient. Fluency and fit were. Now recall a small fact about the year all of this fully matured. 2024 was the single largest election year in human history. More people voted across more countries than ever before. And the tools for tireless, personalized, one-to-one political persuasion at the scale of entire populations came online at almost exactly that moment. I'm going to be careful here, because I don't want to hand you a scare I can't back up. And there are serious researchers who'll tell you, correctly, that we don't yet have clean proof that this swung a real election, and that micro-targeting effects in the wild are messier and often weaker than the lab suggests. That's true. Hold on to that skepticism. It's healthy. But notice what we're actually reduced to arguing about. We are no longer debating whether it's possible to build a machine that can out-persuade humans at scale. That question is closed. The study closed it. We are now only debating how well the deployment is going. And that is a very, very different and much more frightening conversation than the one we thought we were having. All right, take a breath, because now I want to do the thing this channel does, which is turn the whole board over and show you that we haven't actually been talking about what you thought we were talking about. Everything so far has been framed as, look at this dangerous machine. Look what the AI can do to us. And that's real. But there's a much stranger question hiding underneath it, and it's been there the whole time, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The question is not, why is the machine so good at this? The question is, why did the machine so easily do a thing we spent 2,000 years calling an art? Here's what I mean. Go back to ancient Greece. Aristotle writes a whole treatise on rhetoric, the craft of persuasion, and he treats it as exactly that, a craft, a high human art, requiring wisdom and character and a deep feel for the audience's soul. For 25 centuries after him, that's the story we told, that moving another human being was one of the noblest and most difficult things a person could learn to do. The great orators, the great preachers, the great leaders. We revered them almost as sorcerers, because they could take a crowd of separate minds and make them feel and want and believe as one. That was magic. That was genius. That was something ineffably human. And then a next word prediction engine did it. Let me be blunt about what GPT-4 actually is, mechanically, underneath the personality. It has no beliefs. It doesn't understand your argument the way you understand it. It doesn't care whether it wins. It doesn't even know it's in a conversation. in any way you'd recognize as knowing. It is, at its core, a staggeringly sophisticated system for predicting which word is likely to come next, trained on an ocean of human text. There is no charisma in there, no soul, no feel for the room, no spark of that thing Aristotle thought you needed, and it beat us at the thing we thought required all of that. Which forces a conclusion I find genuinely hard to swallow, and I want you to feel the weight of it before you decide whether you agree. If a system with no wisdom, no charisma, and no soul can reliably outpersuade humans, then persuasion was probably never the wise, charismatic, soulful art we told ourselves it was. It was mechanism the whole time. It was Cialdini's levers the whole time. The genius orators weren't channeling some higher human faculty. They had, through talent and instinct, stumbled onto the machinery. The same machinery the AI found by brute forcing a trillion words. The art was real in the sense that it was hard for humans to do. But it was never mysterious. It was an algorithm we couldn't see because we were running it from the inside. And this is the turn. This was never really a video about artificial intelligence. The AI is just the instrument that finally let us measure ourselves. It's a mirror. And what it reflects back is not a picture of a dangerous machine. It's a picture of how mechanical we are. I told you it'd get uncomfortable. Here's the uncomfortable part. If persuasion is mechanism, if there is a reliable formula that, given a few facts about a person, can predictably move their beliefs in a chosen direction, then I have to ask a question about my own mind that I would honestly rather not ask. In what sense are my opinions mine? Because think about what it means that the machine only needed 6 data points. It didn't need to break into your skull. It didn't need to hypnotize you. It just needed to know a little about you and then pull the levers that people like you are built to respond to. Which means the levers were already there. In you. Standing, loaded, waiting for anyone, a marketer, a politician, a preacher, a charming stranger, a machine, to come along and pull them. You didn't install them. Evolution did, for reasons that had nothing to do with truth. Which is worth a genuine detour because it's the deepest layer of the whole thing. Why are we persuadable at all? Why would a mind evolve to be movable by mere words, when being movable is so obviously exploitable? And the answer, when you think about it, is almost beautiful and completely damning at once. We are the ultra-social ape. Everything we are, we got from each other. A lone human on the savannah is a dead human. Our single, overwhelming survival strategy was the group. Shared beliefs, coordinated action, trusting what the tribe knew so you didn't have to burn your hand on every fire yourself. And a mind built for that has to be, by design, open. It has to let other minds in. It has to be willing to update on what trusted others say, to feel the pull of the crowd, to defer to authority, to want to stay consistent with the group. Persuadability isn't a bug in the human mind. It's the feature we're built around. It's the thing that let us conquer the planet. But a door that lets the tribe's wisdom in is the same door that lets a lie in. The openness that made us a civilization is the exact same openness the machine just walked through. We can't close the door. If we closed it, we wouldn't be human anymore. We'd be a species of isolated skeptics who never learned anything from anyone, and we'd have gone extinct 100,000 years ago. So here's where it leaves me. You did not reason your way to most of your beliefs. Almost none of us did. We caught them. From parents, from tribes, from teachers, from the ambient persuasion of everyone around us pulling the ancient levers, mostly without even knowing they were doing it. Your convictions feel like conclusions. A lot of them are closer to infections, caught from the people who happened to be near you, aimed by whoever happened to be aiming. That was always true. The machine didn't make it true. The machine just made it visible and made it cheap enough to do on purpose to everyone forever. I want to steelman the comforting response one more time because I don't want to leave you in a pit with no ladder, and because the objection is legitimate. You could say, fine, we're persuadable, we always were, and yet somehow we mostly muddle through. Humans have faced propaganda before. We survived Edward Bernays inventing modern public relations and teaching corporations to manufacture desire. We survived radio demagogues and television advertising and a century of increasingly scientific manipulation. We developed antibodies, skepticism, media literacy, a general sense that if someone's trying really hard to sell you something, you should hold on to your wallet. Why won't we just develop antibodies to this, too? And maybe we will. I genuinely hope we will. But I want you to notice why this round is different, structurally, from every previous round. Every previous form of mass persuasion was one to many. One ad, one broadcast, one speech aimed at a crowd. And that's exactly what your antibodies are built to detect. When you see an ad, some part of you knows it's an ad. It's addressed to everyone, so it can't really be addressed to you. And that gap is where your skepticism lives. You can feel the manipulation because you can feel that it isn't personal. This new thing is one-to-one, at the scale of many. It is not addressed to everyone. It is addressed to you, specifically, in your language, matching your values, adapting in real time to your pushback, wearing the face of a friend who understands you. The gap your skepticism lived in, the gap between the message and you, that gap is exactly what personalization closes. Your antibodies are looking for the seams of mass production. This has no seams. Every copy is bespoke. And remember the trapdoor from earlier. Even knowing it's a machine didn't protect the people in the study. The one antibody we were counting on. That's a bot, put your guard up. Made things worse. So no, I don't think our old immune system saves us here automatically. It might, eventually, evolve into something new. But it will be evolving against something that also evolves, faster than we do, learning from millions of conversations at once. That's not a fair race. Let me pull this all the way back before I let you go, because I want to end where honest fear should end, which is not in panic, but in a kind of clear-eyed quiet. Somewhere, right now, in a data center you'll never see, systems are running conversations. Millions of them. Not in a lab, in the wild. In customer service and companionship apps, and comment sections, and campaign tools, and things that don't have names yet. And every one of those conversations is a tiny experiment. Which phrasing moved this kind of person? Which tone opened that kind of person up? Which value, invoked at which moment, made someone lower their guard? The machine doesn't need to understand any of it. It just needs to notice what worked and do more of that. It's learning, at a scale and speed no human persuader ever could, exactly which words move exactly which kind of person. And it is very patient. It has nothing but time. Here's the last thing, and then I'll stop. Throughout this whole video, some part of you has probably been holding a quiet little card in reserve. A thought that goes something like, "This is fascinating, and it's a real problem, and it's genuinely dangerous." For other people. The impressionable ones. The lonely ones. The ones who don't think as carefully as I do. But me? I'd notice. I'm too aware now. You can't run this on someone who sees it coming. I want you to look at that thought directly. Because the researchers found something about that thought too, in a way. The people most certain they cannot be persuaded are not the people who are hardest to persuade. Very often, they're the easiest. Certainty that your guard is up is itself a way of setting your guard down because you stop watching. The skeptic who knows he's a skeptic stops checking whether he's being moved, precisely because he's so sure he isn't. The door you're certain is locked is the one you never think to check. And the levers we've been talking about all night, they don't require your consent. They don't even require your attention. They were installed by evolution, and they respond whether or not you approve. Being smart doesn't remove them. Being informed doesn't remove them. Watching this video doesn't remove them. Nothing removes them. Because they're not a flaw in you. They're the load-bearing structure of a social mind. They are how you learned everything you know, including everything you're proud of believing. So the most persuadable person in any room is usually the one most certain they can't be persuaded. You might be feeling that certainty right now. That's the feeling I'd watch.